Thanks, Kim. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Kent Branch September 2022 educational presentation. My name is Cindy Robichaux, and I am part of the Kent Branch operating team and your host for this evening. Thank you for joining us. Before we begin tonight's presentation, Bob Daly, a member of the Lenape Nation and a Kent Branch member, offers a territory acknowledgement.
The land on which we gather, learn, and play is the traditional territory of the Attawandaron, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lunapawak, and Potawatomi peoples who have long-standing relationships to the land, water, and region of southwestern Ontario. The local First Nations of this area include Chippewa of the Thames First Nation, the Caldwell First Nation, Chippewa of Kettle and Stony Point, Oneida Nation of the Thames, the Delaware Nation at Moraviantown, the Munsee Delaware Nation, and Walpole Island First Nation. Additionally, there is a growing urban indigenous population who make the cities of southwestern Ontario home. We value the significant historical and contemporary contributions of local and regional First Nations of Turtle Island.
Thank you, Bob. So we do have a couple housekeeping items. Our presentations are recorded and available on our Kent Branch YouTube channel, which is open to anyone. Your microphones and cameras have been turned off, but we welcome your questions. If you hover your mouse near the bottom of your screen, you will see the bar with the chat icon. If you click on it, the chat box will open. Click on the little arrow beside the word everyone and choose the word questions instead. Here you can type in your message or questions for us or the speaker, which we will get to at the end of the presentation. Your questions will go to Angela Churchill, who will be monitoring the chat for us tonight. Thank you, Angela. So let's get started. For anyone joining us for the first time, let me tell you a bit about Ontario Ancestors. Ontario Ancestors, also known as the Ontario Genealogical Society, is a nonprofit registered charity which was founded in 1961. It is the largest genealogical society in Canada with a mission to encourage, bring together, and assist those interested in the pursuit of family history and to preserve Ontario's genealogical heritage. Be sure to visit the website to learn more about the resources and support available to assist you in your family history research. Ontario Ancestors has over 30 branches and special interest groups all across Ontario, and we are the Kent branch. We focus mainly on Kent County research and general family history. We offer mentoring and education and assistance. We host monthly educational presentations such as this one, and we have a fantastic resource library. Our Family History Resource Library is located on the second floor of the Chatham-Kent Public Library in Chatham. It holds 40 years worth of historical and genealogical resources for Chatham-Kent. We are open to the public on Fridays and Saturdays from 1 p.m. till 5 p.m. And we also try to accommodate other times by appointment. We always like to connect with people interested in genealogy and local history. You can connect with us at this email. You can also join our Kent Branch Facebook group, which has over 700 people who are interested in genealogy and Chatham-Kent history. We also have a very comprehensive website with lots of resources for both our branch members, but also for the general public. So speaking of our website, which is on the screen, please notice the master name index with currently almost 180,000 entries, which anyone can search. On our website, we share upcoming event information, such as you'll see the upcoming Family Tree Maker session and our monthly presentations. And we also have a public featured resource section which we switch out regularly. Right now, we have highlighted the Diaries of Peter Crawford. As you can see, this section is open to the public, so be sure to have a look in it. Another area I would like to point out is the Join Our Mailing List section. We publish a monthly electronic newsletter that's packed full of stories and photos, resources and tips and events of interest to anyone doing Chatham-Kent genealogy or who are just interested in local history. Anyone can subscribe by simply providing your email. And lastly, on our website, we want to mention the section which is totally dedicated to providing resources and many one-of-a-kind materials for our branch members to access from home. This is our virtual members library section. Here you can see some of the categories in the virtual members library section. And each one of these categories is packed full of resources. So this is one of the most used resources and benefits to being a member of our branch. If you would like to know more about this section or how to access it by becoming a member, just send us an email. So we do hope that you will visit our website and browse around. There are some upcoming events which may be of interest to you. Many family historians use a computer program to keep track of their genealogy. One of the most popular programs is the Family Tree Maker. Our society has been hosting Family Tree Maker sessions over the past year, and they have been very well attended. Whether you are new to Family Tree Maker, have lots of experience, or you just want to learn more about it, everyone is welcome to attend the next session on September the 27th at 2 p.m. To attend, simply register on our website at that link that that spot that I showed you, and a Zoom link will be emailed to you. So we have all been waiting for these next events. If you are in the area, you will want to attend the Spirit Walks and the Kent County Jail and Courthouse tours being held on Friday, October the 14th, and Saturday, October the 15th. Tickets are available online at Eventbrite and are first come, first serve. These walks are always a hit and they sell out quickly. You can find more details on the CK Ghost Walks Facebook page. Our next educational presentation will be held on October the 14th at 7 p.m. We will be joined by Alan Campbell, whose research focus over the last few months has been primarily in British records and the General Records Office in England. He will share how he's been making the most out of his research dollars. So look for the link to register on our website and also in our Facebook group. And then finally, on October 29th, the Harrow Early Immigrant Research Society, known as AIRS, celebrates 50 years. That's amazing. Many of us here in Chatham-Kent have ancestors who are connected to Essex County and have utilized AIR's vast collection and resources. If you are able to attend, there will be carpooling from Chatham. So shoot us an email if you're interested in a ride and we can arrange something. So now let's get to tonight's presentation. Top 10 Tips for Being a Better Researcher by Ken McKinlay. Ken's leap into family tree research started with 3 simple family stories that he wanted to confirm or refute. He has now been researching his family tree for over 20 years and discoveries are still being made. He has given talks for several branches of Ontario Ancestors, the British Isles Family History Society of Greater Ottawa, and the Ottawa Public Library. Ken talks mostly focus on methodology and providing the skills needed to help solve those brick wall problems. He has a genealogy-related blog at Family Tree Nuts, where he shares the methodologies that he uses in his own research. So let's give Ken a warm virtual welcome. Ken, welcome, and thank you for joining us. I'll let you take it away.
Thank you so very much, Cindy, for the warm welcome. Just share the screen. Hopefully everything's going to work. And how's that looking?
Great.
Well, thank you, everyone, and welcome to my presentation on my top 10 meta tips and tricks for finding your ancestors. Now, these tips and tricks are not necessarily how to use genealogy websites, but those often forgotten hints and tips to keep in mind when doing your research. So, in the tradition of David Letterman, I will be counting down my top 10 tips and suggestions to help in your genealogy research. So, without further ado, number 10, brick and mortar. We've all heard the numbers bandied about. About 5% of the genealogy-related records have been digitized. Or is that 10%? Or is that 25%? Maybe it's only 1%. Well, whatever that number is, only a fraction of those digitized records have actually been indexed by name. Now, buildings such as archives, libraries, museums, land record offices, at least in Ontario when they were open to us, courthouses, and town halls can hold massive amounts of paper records and microfilms and microfiche that can aid us to break through brick walls. And these places are slowly opening up from their pandemic shutdowns. But you have to do your homework before dropping by. Check out their website. Send them an email. Give them a call before visiting. What are their hours? Well, some local archives museums, well, they may be run by volunteers. And the archive museum is only open on request outside of the summer months. So you might just want to drop them a line to say, are you actually open for us? And maybe make special arrangements to let me in. I did this a number of years ago for Kings County, New Brunswick Museum. Contacted them, arranged for a volunteer, arrived there, found out when I was exchanging the names I was looking for, that the two volunteers, husband and wife team, they're actually distant cousins of mine. Suddenly all kinds of resources appeared out of nowhere. Is there a restriction against taking photos? For example, when visiting the Library and Archives Canada in Ottawa, you need to fill in a form before using your camera. It's easy to do. You just have to do this during their business hours. And if the camera doesn't have a wrist strap on it, well, you can't use it as a handheld camera, but you can borrow a tripod for free. It can mount a standard camera, but it has the adapter to mount your smartphone. Sort of nice of them to do that. What are the costs to visit? Sometimes, actually most of the time, it's free. But sometimes a research permit is needed. I ran that with the UK. Some places that don't allow you to take pictures may allow you to make photocopies instead, but then you are charged for those copies. But the place may not accept a credit or debit card, so you may need to pay cash. Always double check this little detail. But most importantly, and it sounds so silly to say this, be nice. Just saying thank you. Chatting with them just for a few moments. it does help make that connection, and they may go out of their distance to actually find additional information for you. I've seen it where somebody has been a little snarky to the poor person handling the desk, and yet they get their answers. But if they'd been just a little bit nicer, they might have found out about another resource that is sort of buried in the catalog. So be nice. It never hurts. Number 9. Use your census. Know what was recorded for the census, or even in a birth, baptism, banns, marriage, death, or funeral record. But I'm focusing on the census enumerations here. For example, did you know that Nova Scotia didn't do nominal household census enumerations until 1871? New Brunswick, Ontario, and Quebec, well, they were doing nominals in 1851 and 1861. Nova Scotia, it was only head of household in their 1851 and 1861 censuses, with a total numbers for the occupants. That could drive you a little crazy in Nova Scotia. You're trying to find your ancestor who was a child and you don't know who their parents are. Know when the census took place. For example, when was the 1851 census of the British colonies of Canada taken? And this is East and West Canada, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia. Well, New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, they were on the ball. They were started 11 January 1851. Canada East, or Quebec, and Canada West, Ontario, well, it took them a year. It wasn't until 12 January 1852 that the census took place. That could be important. If somebody was born in 1851, yeah, they're going to be on that census, at least for Canada East, Canada West. If they were born on the 1st of January 1851 in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, well, Nova Scotia, you got problems anyhow. But in New Brunswick, they won't be on that census because the census happened on the 11th of January. Know what has survived. Looking for the 1890 federal census of the United States, good luck. In January 1921, a fire in the U.S. Commerce Building damaged that census, and only fragments, and I mean small fragments, of Alabama, District of Columbia, Georgia, Illinois, Minnesota, New Jersey, New York, North Carolina, Ohio, South Dakota, and Texas have survived. Well, that's a lot of places. But they only survived for about 6,160 names. Not a lot of names. Same with if you're dealing with places like Ireland. Or, oh, you're hoping for maybe the 1931 census for England and Wales. Yes, sorry, doesn't exist. You're going to have to actually wait until 1951 for their next census to be released in 2051. A long time. Know the rules the enumerator was supposed to follow. In the 1841 census of Scotland, the enumerators were actually instructed to round down the ages of persons 15 years and over to the nearest 5 years. Hence, a given age of 28 would be recorded as 25. Someone who is 63, well, it's going to be 60, and so on. If a person lied about their age, this combined with the rounding down could really distort the actual age. Of course, you're going to find instances where enumerators did not adhere to this instruction on age and actually inserted the given age. How do you know if that person really is 20 years old? Well, you need to do this next part, which is actually view the image. And this applies for all the records that you want to look at. If you look at the whole page, you may find out, everybody actually has non-rounded down numbers for their age. Looks like the guy didn't follow the rules. Instead of saying, oh, that's a bad enumerator, I love those guys. Also, looking at that whole page for clues, it can really help with figuring out that cursive writing. Some of the enumerators have beautiful writing. Others, well, yeah, you're gonna have to look at many pages to try to figure out, is that actually a G or some other letter? Always read the full line and don't rely on the transcription. In a transcription, stuff may be left out. Here are the lines for the family of John Barnaby in Digby, Nova Scotia in the 1871 census. Now, if I stopped reading after the marital status, which is honestly, most of us do, I would have missed this little tick in the deaf and dumb column for his son, Abder. With this little clue, I was actually able to find his son in New Brunswick and Massachusetts as a teacher in schools for the deaf, and then also locate his death notice in a Boston newspaper. I had searched for about 2 to 3 years before I actually started reading the whole line, and I had never seen this. Once I saw it, within about 15 to 30 minutes, I had a good chunk of his life now known. Number 8. Just because you spell the name one way today doesn't mean it has been spelled that way always. Say the name out loud. If they came from another country, try saying that name with the appropriate accent. Yeah, you're gonna probably sound really, really silly, but it actually does work. Remember, that is how the priest, enumerator, or official heard it and then wrote down the name. For example, I was looking for a family with the last name of Houghton. They appeared in census records as Houghton and Haughton. Very understandable variations. But I couldn't find them in the 1881 Census of Canada. I had found them in the 1871 in Hastings County. And by 1891, they were living in tiny townships, Simcoe County, Ontario. Because of the other research I've done on the family, I started with the assumption that they were living in tiny township in 1881. Well, I actually had to look through almost all of the 1881 census pages for tiny township before I found them listed as Hutton, Hutton. Well, effectively a phonetic spelling of their name. Now, there were only 64 pages, and I'd found that family, of course, on page 61. But it didn't take that much time to find them, just a little bit of clicking and scanning very quickly. Now, I could have taken a different route to find that family by searching for any of the younger children by their first names only, which I'd found in the 1871 census. But back then, I didn't have the wisdom I have now. Experience is a really good teacher. Number 7. Would you believe that all 5 of these are from the census enumerations taken every 10 years for the same person? We are looking at the entries for Mary O'Neill. And I find that she gets older and younger by a couple years, depending on the census. How do I know that this is the same person? Well, I know her family members, either her parents or her husband. Why the variations in the years? Well, sometimes it really depends on understanding the question and who answered it. In at least one of the censuses, it asked for their age as of their next birthday, while others just ask for their age. So make sure you pay attention to the column headers on the forms. And as for who answered the question, well, if you ask the mom, how old is her kids, she will tell you the exact age, possibly what phase of the moon it was, and what dinner she missed. At least that's the excuse my mom tells me about my sister's birth. But Dad, you're lucky if he gets in with 1 or 2 years of the correct age. So here's young Mary O'Neill. She's 13. Or is that 18? At least in the 1851 census. The transcriber read it as 18. But based on the handwriting on the form and later enumerations, I'm pretty certain it's around 13. In 1861, she's now 21 years old. It makes a little bit more sense for the 1851 in New Brunswick to be 13. 1871, she's recorded as being 30 years old. 1881, well, she only aged 9 years. She's 39 years. Finally, in 1891, she's listed as being 51 years of age. She actually got older, faster later on. But remember, it all quite often depends on understanding the question being asked and who answered it. And of course, who wouldn't want to shave a year or 2 off their age as they get older? Number 6. In several cases, following the money has provided a clue or an answer to a mystery or brick wall I've been struggling with. Some, but not all possible sources of following the money include the wills and probates, land records such as grants, deeds, and mortgages, notary records, especially for those who lived in Quebec. Here's an example from a page from the probate of Moshe Schoenberger. Here's listed the people receiving the property, goods, or money in his will. In this case, their names, residence at the time of probate, and relationships are all listed. With these details, I could find his children living in New York City and in New Haven, Connecticut, in marriage and death records, along with census enumerations, except for that annoying missing 1890 census of the United States. That's a shame that one was lost. Not all probate and will files will have this type of document, but there may be clues. In the land records, you can find deeds, grants, mortgages, and yes, even wills. You might even find the information about the regiment they might have been serving in, or where a relative was living. This is from the Kings County Land Deed Book for New Brunswick. This deed gave me the critical clue for William Small Howe, my third great-grand uncle. He had just disappeared from view in 1851. Not a trace. But this deed stated he was a doctor of medicine residing in Lewiston, Maine in 1885, and that his wife was named Grace. Suddenly, it opened up a whole slew of records, including his service in the Civil War in the United States in the 1860s. So you never know what will open up when you start following that money. Number 5. These next 3 tips actually are from my personal genealogy mantra. First, trust no one. If you've ever attended my talk on genealogical miracles in the past, you might remember this tree from Ancestry for James McKinlay, my third great-grandfather. Yeah, don't try to read it on your screen. It's really hard to make out. But this is one of those strange trees that, if you are fortunate, you never, ever have to deal with on any of the genealogy sites. And this is from one of the tree hints that Ancestry presented me. It blew my mind away when I started looking at it. I just had to contact the owner for an explanation. And effectively, the answer that he gave me was that he combined trees in the hopes of finding ancestors. I can just hear some of you groaning at that reply. Let us look at some of the little problems. Well, his mother was definitely long-lived, since he was born when she was 114 years old. Yep, wrong mother. Simple, that one. Or he married at least one of his wives after he died. But for another spouse, the marriage took place before she was born. So this must be a case of an arranged marriage by grandparents before either James or Margaret were born. Not. Or he married his daughter-in-law, Margaret Stewart. Yeah, I don't think so either. Now, this is the most accurate tree I know for this James McKinlay. And it's actually mine. But even then, I have doubts about his parents. So I've actually since removed those names from my tree on Ancestry and have made notes about my own lack of faith in the information within the tree. Now, this is an extreme example, but it's also why I trust no one when it comes to doing research, especially research done by others. A lot of times, I don't even trust my own research when I come across that something's different. And I assume that I'm wrong and I have to prove that I'm right. And I've caught a couple interesting mistakes. But I will use these trees and family history compilations as pointers and possible clues in my research. Recently, because of a profile on Family Search of an umpteenth cousin, I found a son that I didn't have in my tree. But did I blindly add that new find? No. And that leads me to number 4. Verify everything. Here's a case for Emil Schoenberger, the son of Morris or Moritz, Moses or Moshe Schoenberger. And I ran into a problem with his tree. Everyone's tree has Pauline as his mother. Only one problem. Emil doesn't think so. Here is a transcription from Family Search of his marriage registration. But since we all know transcriptions can have errors, and I know that the New York City marriage records have been digitized Family Search, I knew I needed to also verify the transcription. At the time, for that to happen, I had to drop by my local family history center. And here is the return of marriage. To my eyes, his mother's maiden name, it's not Pauline. It looks like Cathy Shack. But that's only one source. And I've not been able to get a copy of his death registration in Connecticut to see if it differs. But of course, he would have written his death registration. One of his descendants would have written that. So that's iffy. However, he does have an older sister, Teresa. And she also was married in New York City. Maybe her marriage registration has a clue. Here it looks like she believes her mother is Katarina Schuck. And on her New York death registration, her son thinks Teresa's mother is Catherine Schack. I think that's pretty good correlation of evidence that Emil's mother wasn't Pauline. Different spelling, but phonetically very similar. I'm still working on the siblings of Moshe, and so far I found that one of Emil's younger brothers, Alexander, has Priscilla Bajansky as his mother. Might Moshe's first wife had died in Bohemia before coming to the United States, and he married a second wife before immigrating. Just goes to show how important it is to verify family trees and even the records. It can change a family's ancestor considerably. Number 3. Even if it is written in stone, it might be wrong. This is the marker for Robert Howe, my third great-grandfather and his family, at least some of the family members. As you can plainly see, it is recorded in stone that he died in 1900. Unfortunately, we can also find him recorded in the 1901 Census of Canada. That census was taken on or after March 31st, 1901, with details of the household as it was on the 31st of March. Since zombies at that time were not recorded in the census, I had to make one of two assumptions. Either the information on the marker was wrong, or the family made a huge mistake when providing information to the enumerator. I sort of used Occam's razor in this one. I went with the most likely. The date on the marker was wrong. It did take some time and a visit to the Library and Archives Canada to view the marker film of the Kings County record to get the answer. Fortunately, that newspaper is a weekly, so it didn't take too long for me to find the mention of his death. It was about an hour of flipping through the newspapers. There, I found him in the October 25th edition in 1901 of the Kings County record, where he died at his son's residence on Wednesday as a result of being severely burned in a fire. What's interesting states his rather poor state of mind, and in the census, it was written that he was feeble. So there's some interesting correlations there with the census. And it also tells you more about the story, what happened. Now, they wouldn't have written this if it had happened in 1900. So I'm pretty sure that that marker is wrong. And based on other family stories and records I've received from family members, I think that was a reconstructed stone, a replacement stone, put up by his granddaughter. And she got the year wrong. So memory not exactly great. But that's normal. Great clues, but we need to verify them. Number 2, almost there. Read. Sometimes it gets scary when you look at other people's online trees. And in this case, they posted an image of a grave marker and then ignored what is on the stone. Here is an example of Teresa Wheel from somebody's tree. As you can see, the person has stated the birth is about 1850 in Bohemia, and the death is on August 27th, 1931 in Manhattan, New York City. Only one little problem. That grave marker image they associated with Teresa states she died on December 9th, 1927. Something's not right there. Well, it seems they used the New York extracted death index for a Teresa H. Wheel that died August 27th, 1931 as the reference. But a bit of searching on Ancestry brought up another index entry for another Teresa Wheel that died December 9th, 1927. That matches what's on that marker. I know that Family Search has images of the Manhattan death certificates for that period of time. At that time, the only issue was that I had to go to my local family history center to view them. Not a problem. I have one nearby. But first, I need to search Family Search for the film number. And to save me a little bit of effort. Took a little bit of work because, well, actually, Family Search transcribed it as Woyle. I do know that from prior research, her father was Morris or Moritz or Moshe Schoenberger. So it looked like a good match. Now I have to look on film 2056150 and locate certificate number 27474. Sort of almost made it easy for me. Now, the New York City birth, marriage, and death registrations are actually online and free for viewing from the comfort of one's home. But back pre-pandemic times, when I was doing this research, I did have to visit my local family history center. As for confirmation that this is the right person, here's Teresa's registration from the city of New York. It matched the information I knew about her family. I did send an ancestry message to the owner of that tree, and he actually admitted his mistake and updated his tree. I even sent him a report on this family line for his review, since it appears he primarily relied on those indexes and not the documents themselves. So it really is important to see and read the records and other source material. And we're coming up to the last one, and it really is the hardest one. My top 10 hint, think. I know it seems obvious, but honestly, it is the most important tip I can give you is to think critically. All those other tips and tricks depend on you using your noggin. If it doesn't look right, just seems strange, or there is a conflict with what you think you know or have already found, then try to figure out what is going on. I had that with an Isabella Cuthbertson in Scotland. I wrote down the information, put in my master tree, put on my ancestry tree. A hymn popped up and said, hey, this looks right. Looked at it, everything looked right except for the birth date. It didn't match what I had. And they had a different birth registration certificate for her from Scotland. I looked at mine. Did you know that there were actually 3 Isabella Cuthbertsons who were born the same year in the same county in Scotland? Yeah, I didn't either. The birth registration I had was the wrong one because I didn't think and read the whole page. Her parents on the registration I had didn't match the parents I'd found on her marriage registration. I sent a thank you email to this person on Ancestry because they helped me to fix a mistake I had made. But if something doesn't look right, seems strange, write down your thoughts. Bounce your ideas off your fellow researchers. Post it on Facebook. Maybe even walk away from that one person for a day or so, and then come back and relook at that information you have found. All of that information. Even if everyone says one thing, you have found something to the contrary, don't follow the herd. Record what you have found. Add an explanation as why you believe that you are correct or have a doubt. But make sure you think. Don't blindly copy those family trees, even if it's from a book from the late 1800s when they were really writing these books. Thank you so very much for sticking around and listening to these tips and tricks. I really do hope that they help you in your own research, especially in those pesky brick walls we all seem to have. Now, of course, these are not just all the tips I could have given you. Maybe number 7A could be write down the place as it was known then, not now. Because if you write down maybe the birth of somebody in 1881 as being born in Ontario, and you search for records for Ontario, you might miss that one book that has the title Upper Canada in it. So 7A might be write down the name of that place then, and then make a note to yourself of, yeah, Upper Canada is also known as Canada West, and now it is called Ontario. It might help you in your own research. Are there any questions?
Well, we'll let Angela gather if there's any questions being sent to her. But I just want to comment that your presentation is very fitting for our September presentation. The kids are all back to school now, and many of us are also getting back to our research after taking a break over the summer. So you offered some really great tips for all those people who are maybe newbies or are just getting into family history, but also refreshers for us who need to be reminded. I think you get so focused sometimes and you're so used to doing things your own way or a certain way, you kind of forget, and it's a good reminder to slow down. Like you say, look at the whole census record. Just don't be, grabbing the information that you're needing. So I think this was a really good refresher for all of us to, focus on those tips. And, I was chuckling when you said that you were going through the census, and the one that you found was on page 61 of 64. Of course it was.
Yes, that was my reaction too, saying, really, you couldn't be on page one. It just would have been so much easier page one.
Exactly.
But I also learned more about the area by just flipping through. How big were the families? It gave me a social, economic perspective that does help us tell the story about our ancestors.
Right. And I was going to comment in my first part of it, but my part was getting a little too long, is I just wanted to reiterate what you were saying basically at the very beginning about contacting where you're going to make sure, they can accommodate you. We just in the last month, and I don't know if it's just because the border's back open again, but we have had a person from California. We've had a wonderful couple from Texas. We had a gentleman from South Carolina, and we just had another couple this past weekend from Washington, and they all emailed ahead of time. Unfortunately, they weren't in the area on our Friday and our Saturday, so we did make some alternate arrangements, and quite honestly, we were so thrilled to help them. I think they probably received more attention from us one-on-one than if they would have just popped into the library when we were open. So yeah, it's really important. And there's definitely things that we tell them, where the parking is, when the little store is open, to bring a USB, because we allow people just to download if they find something. So just those little tips they might be able to give to you to prep for you to go and visit them. But yeah, that was a really, really key tip as well. So,
and even share the names you're researching, because
mhm,
when you walk in the door, you might actually find a pile of books
yeah,
and manuscripts for you, and the person that's helping you is distantly related.
yeah,
You
yeah,
never know because of her volunteers.
exactly. And we all get so excited because it's something new. We're like, sometimes we get exhausted in our own family trees, and as soon as somebody new comes in, it's like, oh, that'd be great. Let me help you find it. And yeah, we quite often prepare things and try to find things ahead of time. So good tips. Angela, are there any questions?
Yeah, kind of two parts to one question. Talking about when you have the conflicting evidence, like a tombstone and a death record. Do you have a particular method that you use to kind of work through it, timelines, mind mapping or something? And then the second part of that question would be, when you've kind of decided on what you're going with, do you record it in your family tree or something so that you remember it when you come back to it, so that you're not puzzling, why did I choose this and not the other? And for myself personally, I've seen people who've written those notes on their family tree, and it's very helpful to me to see that they've written that and why they chose something. So
Actually, I'll do part two first. I use Legacy Family Tree as my software, and I have trees on Ancestry also, and a bunch of other software. I record in my research notes, especially if I've got something that says, no, this is just really wrong. I'll record in my research notes. Here's what I found. Here's different places. I'll always save the images of the documents, or even do screenshots and save them in the directory I have for that person. So I can always look at, what did I see when I made this decision. As for figuring it out, I wish I had a methodology. I will look at, I've got two monitors on my computer, and I will put up the multiple documents on both the screens and look at them. You also have to, the one rule that people used to say, people still say, is you need 3 source documents. Well, okay, I've got a death registration, the grave marker, and the obituary for my dad. Guess who, that's 3 sources, right? Well, guess who actually provided the information? Me, for my genealogy software. I'm a single source actually for those 3 records. So I will look at the documents. I will look at how they were created, when they were created, who provided the information. So on a death registration, was it a family member? Was it somebody else? When was that information recorded? And honestly, I use grave markers as secondary. They make for a great clue of where I want to find the death registration, if it actually has survived. Can I find maybe a funeral record? In Ottawa, not up to modern times, but fairly recently, Beechwood Cemetery has made available their registers online. That would have been created at the time the person was buried, or very close to it. That becomes a really good source. So yeah, timelines really do help. And just understanding how was a record created really does help me.
okay. How about any other organizational tips for putting your research together? It's kind of a broad question.
I use software. I grew up in the internet age, or actually I grew up as the internet was growing up. And I use a computer for it. I like using software to do it because if I make a correction, it's corrected everywhere. Versus if I was using paper, I might have to remember to update 4 or 5 different forms, and I'm guaranteed I'm going to miss at least one of those forms every 1 in 10 times. So that's a lot of mistakes being propagated. I'm using legacy family tree because when I made this choice 10 some odd years ago, it fit what I wanted out of it. I wanted to be able to make reports, not for me, but to be able to share with my mom, with my dad, with family members abroad. And I liked how their reports looked. I came from PATH, and their screens were close enough that I could deal with it. Maybe now I might go with Roots Magic, because they've improved their reports considerably, and they synchronize with Ancestry, with a tree there. Personally, I don't like FTM, Family Tree Maker, and that's me, actually. I just don't like the screen. It just drives me crazy. I don't know why, but I tried them all out to find the one that worked for me, that didn't force me to make changes on how I operated. And that was really important, because my problem is I am horrible at source citations. I have Elizabeth Shown Mill's book on my bookshelf. I consult it when I have to. It's a tome and it's a reference book. Legacy Family Tree and Roots Magic actually make use of that fairly well. So I can actually put in a chapter or a section number, and it'll actually say, well, here's a template you want to use. I really like that. It helps me.
That's it that I have for questions. Thank you.
You're most welcome.
There's a comment from Heather. She says, thank you so much. This has definitely helped me to refocus on my outcomes. So that's great.
I have to remember my own tips at times. And it's like, I missed something. I glanced over it. I didn't read it. And then I said, did I just miss something? There's something important here. And I have to remind myself of my own tips, except for my own mantra. Trust no one, verify everything, and even if it's written in stone, it may be wrong. I live by that when I'm doing my research.
Yeah, that is a good one. I have an example too. My and it's not even that far back. She's only my second great grandmother. Her name is, as far as we know, Collison. On her headstone, there's an N, Collinson. And I would think that written in stone, they would have got that right. But that was the first time I actually saw that. Every other census, death records, everything. So maybe they made the boo-boo and couldn't afford to get it changed back then. So
actually, I've got the same problem with an Esther Fraser. I walked up to her grave marker and it says Easter Fraser. I'm not going to argue. It's Esther.
Yeah.
All the records Esther. She wasn't Easter. She was named after an Esther. A typo on a grave marker, whiteout does not work, and you can't backspace.
Yeah. And back in the day, things were expensive, right? So
even now, things are expensive.
Yeah, even more so. Yeah. Okay. Well, that was great. Like I say, thanks for refocusing us all, and hopefully everyone was able to take away a tip or two from the presentation. We thank you all for joining us, and we appreciate you spending your Friday night with us. And we hope you will join us again in October when Alan joins us to talk a little bit about his research in England. And he has some great tips as well. So these types of presentations are great because you're learning something from someone else's experiences, what works, what doesn't, their mistakes, and hopefully it will help you to move forward in your own family history without going down some of the same paths that maybe somebody else did. But sometimes those rabbit holes are fun and you learn, like you say, experience is a great teacher. So thank you, Ken, for joining us. Truly appreciate it. And if anybody wants to rewatch the recording, they can do that at a later date in case you missed anything. So thanks so much, everybody, and have a good evening. Goodbye now.
Bye, folks, and thanks for joining us.